Welcome to Nocturnal Nonsense, where our topics and words are eclectic at best. So,
We talk about things and stuff and things.
Welcome to Nocturnal Nonsense. The show's made up. The topics don't matter.
true.
I
So-
am one of your hosts, Vaughn, and with
I'm
me
Zach.
I have these two fucks.
Yeah, Adam. Yeah.
Yeah, that guy. So, what is our topic today, boys?
I think I kind of wanted to launch into just something that I know we all know at least a bit about, maybe some of us more than others. Talk about the riveting game that is Path of Exile. Grinding Gear Games, Chris Wilson and all that.
Winding Pier fame.
True. With the release of Path of Exile 2 announced a while ago now, right?
It's been 3 years?
Yeah.
4 years? I think it was 2019 that it got announced.
Yeah, so here we are,
Maybe
4
even
years
2020.
later. Don't know how much closer we are to Path of Exile 2, but
We're getting close, actually.
It's
they're
like
planning on having the beta start relatively soon, and I think the current projected date is just 2024.
If you think about it, 4 years is like 6 months in developer time, so like we're on good track.
True.
He makes a good point. And it's still going to launch buggy and broken.
Yeah.
Looking at you, Raider.
Every game developer ever right now.
You're not wrong.
Timelines.
So, I don't know what like, so we talked about this a little bit beforehand. You guys know basically nothing about POE 2, right?
I know that it is set to release. That is the extent of my knowledge.
Okay.
I know that it is the sequel to POE 1.
All right, yeah, that's everything. Nothing else is in there.
That's what I'm
about
talking
it.
about.
I have the POE 2 like launch page open. I can just like skim through that for you guys, just to give you like a little idea. So Path of Exile 2 is a new 7-act storyline that is available alongside the original Path of Exile 1 campaign. Both the old and new storylines same to the same shared Atlas endgame. Path of Exile 2 retains all expansion content that has been created over the last 6 years and introduced a new skill system. New ascendancy classes, and engine improvements, and more. I was at work when ExileCon was happening, and I watched I got so lucky that when the PoE 2 trailer started, I had no customers, and I could just sit there and watch it, and I cannot tell you the amount of hype that I had, and anytime I've gone back and rewatched the trailer, I still get that same level of hype. It's really, first of all, it's gorgeous. They like pan the camera back or change the angle, I think is what they said. It's not even more zoomed out, but the angle that they've changed it to makes it look more zoomed out. And it just visually it is gorgeous. Like, I think Diablo 4, like the trailers that we've seen for that and the footage we've seen for that, is probably one of the most gorgeous action RPGs that we've ever had. And I think that PoE 2 is on par with, if not like better, but in a different art direction, if that makes sense. It's still it feels like such a huge upgrade over like everything currently. Just looking at it. And one of the big things too that we're getting with the new skill system is you can have, if I remember correctly, every single gem that you have on your gear can be a sixling. As well as we're getting a like function where you can like link a bunch of skills to a single button. Specifically, this is for auras. so that you can just have all of your auras tied to a single button. So if you die,
I like
you can
that
just turn
quality
on.
of life.
Yeah, there's just a lot of big QOL stuff.
About fucking time.
I think one of the ascendancies might be able to have like jewels socketed in their ascendancy tree. We're getting shape shifting as a mechanic.
I wonder how they're gonna balance all this out.
It's going to be interesting. There's been like a running gag in the community. Not even a running gag. Just it's
You mean
basically
fishing?
definitive that if every character can have a six link, every character is gonna run Animate Guardian because you have no reason not to. Because even if you don't invest heavily into minions, just being able to have a six link Animate Guardian is gonna do a lot for you as far as making it unkillable. And Animate
Right.
Guardian is just so much power.
Yeah, so it sounds like they've got scaling to do all over the place, which is probably why we're 4 years in the making of Path of Exile 2, because they keep going back into things being like, well, this shit's broken, so let's spend a month fixing that, I guess.
Yeah, and so the way that it's gonna go with the two separate campaigns, because they're keeping the first one in the game playable, is depending on which campaign you do, you're going to have different ascendancies available to you. So if you play the base game, then you have all of the current ascendancies available to you. But if you play the Path of Exile 2 campaign, you get all of the new ascendancies. So
So
we are
do you know
doubling them.
how the Path of Exile 2 release? So it sounds like, is everything moving to Path of Exile 2?
Nothing's
Like,
moving.
but okay, let me reiterate. When Path of Exile 2 launches, are we basically getting Path of Exile 1 with a bunch of basically DLC?
You could kind of look at it that way. Like everything is getting added into the base game, but like even Path of Exile 1 is getting revamped with the new improved engine, all of the new like graphics, camera angle technology and stuff like that, the new skill systems and everything. You could almost like so you don't you're not gonna have to like rebuy microtransactions or anything like that. It's basically just gonna come down to you could think of it as the everything is getting added on top of, but it also is a little more. It's almost like we're getting Path of Exile 2 as its own new thing, but you can still go back and play the old campaign.
Okay.
Just in it, but like a remastered version of it, basically. Which is the other reason that it's probably taking them a lot of time because they're basically remastering POE 1 as well as building POE 2.
Well, what do you want to see come out of Path of Exile 2?
I'm looking forward to the shape-shifting stuff.
Okay.
I think that that's a really cool thing that a lot of people have been really excited for. I know when I saw in the trailer the whatever, I can't remember what character it was, but whatever class, like just turn into a fucking bear or whatever. It was just like, oh my god, wait, did that just happen? We're getting this. One of the ranger ascendancies, I remember them saying, is going to have a built-in shapeshift form, which is like a cat person, which is going to have like a bunch of different buffs and whatnot. And I remember them also saying one of the ranger ascendancies is going to turn the bow into a melee weapon, which is
Oh,
interesting.
great. That sounds great. You just take the string off, start beating him with a stick.
Right. Like they didn't. I don't remember if they elaborated on it more than that, but
So it's just a really thin staff.
right.
Hey, I got one of them.
Hey yo. Hold up. I don't know. For me, I just want like you know me. I'm a big end game player. Like I want a cool campaign. I want a fun campaign. I want something fresh.
Yeah, fair.
But at the end of the day, the campaign isn't the biggest thing in the world to me. I love the lore of this game, and I'm excited for that. But I'm mostly at this point interested in seeing what they do with the storyline, but also with like what we can do end game and like what the changes are going to mean for mapping and pushing your atlas and what the atlas is even going to look like at that point in time.
Right.
Because the end game storyline I think is really interesting, and I think that we're being set up to see a lot more and a lot more intense like eldritch nonsense, uh, and I'm very here for that. So I don't
Yeah,
know.
that sounds exciting. I mean, from a non, I've never paid too much. Okay, I can't say I've paid no attention to the lore. I've paid very little attention to the lore, and whenever you and Moose are talking, I kind of listen in on when you guys are talking about the lore. But from my perspective, what I want to see out of Path of Exile 2 is the same thing I look for in Path of Exile 1, which is I like bossing, right? I was like, my main draw to the game was like, okay, this looks fun. This looks mechanically difficult. I want to feel good about myself while I'm gaming. Synthesize dopamine. Hey, I did a good job, and this was fun. So I'm hoping in Path of Exile 2 they're gonna have some more bosses. Maybe not necessarily like I don't want Uber variants where it's just like, oh, it's difficult because you need gear upgrades. I want to see stuff like the Sears fight where it's got like super mechanics. You have to know what you're doing. Fast reaction times and all that fun stuff.
Something like
You
how
know,
Maven's fight is like set up and all that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I really like the Maven fight. Fuck the memory game. I like the
true.
Maven fight.
So I think that you're gonna be excited that like they've shown some of the like just campaign bosses, and their big thing is just kind of showing off how much they've improved on boss fights. Like in some of the gameplay that they've shown off, they show you the equivalent of Hail Rake, which is the medicine chest quest where you get the Quicksilver in Act 1. And it looks and has like end game mechanics, like stuff you would expect from that. Like the campaign is going to be
Okay.
harder. Um, and
So is the campaign being harder a good thing? See, I would be cool if they made it exponentially more difficult and then shortened it.
And that's, I think, kind of what they're doing. Because I know that they have said that the new campaign is going to be faster to get through. But um, the boss fights are definitely going to be more mechanically intense. I don't know that they're going to be straight up more difficult, but they're definitely trying to be more, like, mechanically impressive. To be more on par with, like, newer content.
I hope that's
Because
the case.
yeah, because like a lot of the enemies in the game, especially in like in the acts, everything like Act 4 back, were made like 10 years ago, and they had no idea. They had like much less experience. It was just three dudes in a garage at that time, so like a lot of the enemies are just like, yeah, walk in a circle, dumbass. Whereas like once you get past Act 4. And even like Malachi, I think, is a good example. But like once you get into Act 5 and onward, like a lot more of the bosses are like, these are things that I do. You need to not stand in this spot. You need to dodge, etc.
Or you need to stand in this spot.
Exactly. Um. Yeah, I think that we're gonna see a lot of good boss content going forward. I think that there's going to
Make me
be.
happy.
I think the other thing that's going to be really interesting, like tying into boss fights and mapping and the new skill system, because you can have everything as a six link, or at least multiple six links, like more than one or two. I don't know how they're balancing that exactly, but it means that you're not hindered to having one skill be your like main thing. you can have a more dynamic play style. You can have a clear skill and a single target skill, which is hard for most builds to fit in. Most builds
Right.
just kind of have to go with what they get.
No, which is fair. That'll definitely be an interesting change, having multiple six links. It's probably going to feel broken coming from Path of Exile into Path of Exile 2, because you're like, wow, I have so much more versatility and I have no idea what to do with all of it.
Yeah. The other cool thing with skills is that they're adding weapon skills to some degree. Like, so we're getting crossbows and spears.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, and spears have like a built-in dash skill. And crossbows have different ammo that you can switch between. For fizz, fire, cold, and I think lightning also, but it might just be fizz, fire, and cold. And they all have different damage values, different effects, and everything. Different skills that tie into their ammo type. It's going to be a very different game, and I'm very excited for it. I have
Yeah, me too,
so
actually.
much time sunk into this stupid game.
Something I've come across over my time playing Path of Exile with bossing in particular is, there's the regular bosses and then there's the uber variations of the bosses, which is like cool in theory, but my problem with it has been this far is the uber variants of each boss feels more like, hey, have you spent X amount of money on your build? Well, if you did, you can now do this boss. I want a boss that, like, I like how Searing Exarch and Eater and, I mean, all the Uber variants honestly have, like, extra mechanics put into them. Or, like, Exarch, you have the dog that chases you through all the balls, and, all of his skills are a little bit different, but it's relatively the same fight. What I don't like is the fact that I like the extra mechanics. I hate the fact that it's kind of like, well, you need to up your build DPS, and they just had get damage reduction and all of this other stuff. So instead of it being a skill test, it's more of a money test.
Yeah.
And I personally am not a big fan of that. But that being said, I mean, the cool thing is in the Uber fights, you definitely there is still a skill level. You do need to have the skill to beat that boss. Like, take a Uber Shaper, who's a lot of fun to do, actually, I think, because I think the Uber Shaper actually fight adds a lot of value, just being Uber variant to normal variant, because the normal variant is very, very simple, right? He has a very slow teleslam, he has the few skill shots. Adding in the extra shapers and, the fact that the degens stay over the course of the round, I really like all of that. I really like what they did with that fight, because they made it a lot harder, but I don't feel like I need to spend 6 weeks worth of money making cash that I got in the game to get to the point where I can beat Uber Shaper. I feel like Uber Shaper is a boss where even if you have a lower DPS, as long as you know what the hell you're doing and you have the mechanical skill, then you'll get through it.
Yeah.
Except for bullet hell phase. Fuck that phase.
It's true. I've not personally done too many of the Ubers. The Ubers are not like content that I feel like. I like bossing, but I don't care that much about bossing. I've always been a map blaster, but
yeah, you're a maps guy.
yeah, I'm very much a maps guy. But I do think what I've heard with the overall consensus of the community is that people seem to like Uber Maven, Uber Shaper, Uber Elder, Uber Eater, and Exarch, but nobody likes Uber Sirius. Everyone thinks Uber Sirius is just really shit.
I actually haven't done the Uber Cirrus fight. I've just done the normal Cirrus fight, and I really like that fight.
You have a
I don't
non-zero
wanna
chance of Sirius just fucking off in the fight and exiting the map.
What?
Yep, I've seen clips of it happening. Like he just leaves. Like
Hey,
it's a bug, but he just
Hey,
leaves.
Chris, fix your game, bud. No, I guess that is kind of lame. It sucks because that's a really awesome boss fight.
Sirius itself, I love the Awakener fight. Like I when Awakener got added into the game and I did the fight, it took me a couple tries to actually get it down. I can do it fairly consistently now, but it's one of those fights. It's a really good fight. It's got cool mechanics. It's very thematic. I love the setting of the fight. Just watching Oriath burning around you. I love the like. I like the story direction a lot with that too because it brings back like tying the end game into the campaign. Like it doesn't just feel like okay, well now you're playing a whole different world. It shows that the Atlas really does have influence over the rest of the world. But like there I don't know. You used to, so the way that fight used to work was every time you killed a conqueror, the Atlas had regions. And I think it had 8 regions, and those regions you could get 4 watchstones for, which are kind of like the void stones we have now. But they would only raise the area level of that section. And you had to kill each conqueror once on each difficulty, basically. And you could get, and every time you had, each set of 4 watchstones would raise your awakening level by 1 up to 8. And you could push it to 9 with certain mechanics, but that's a different thing, and that came a little later. But so Awakener 8. So it would what it would do was it would increase monster life, damage, quantity, rarity, and map modifier effect. I think that might have been the first time we had like a mechanic that increased map modifier effect, which is huge for mapping because of the bonuses it gives you.
Yep.
And yeah, so Awakener 8 was the like pinnacle. That was like the hardest content in the game at that point. They had a whole like event at League launch for like racing to be the first to kill Awakener 8, specifically on hardcore solo self-found. And that was a really fun event to like not take part in because I wasn't about to go play hardcore solo self-found, but I think it was like a $10,000 cash prize.
Oh wow!
Yeah, to be the first person to kill Awakener 8 Cirrus on hardcore solo self-found. And I know there is going to be like similar events like that when POE 2 comes out. I would love to see more events like that come out when we do like in the next Atlas expansion, which I would have to imagine has to be coming this year. Like in the next expansion should be Atlas focused. Because they usually Atlas changes are at the start of the first league of the new year. So it should be interesting to see.
I know a big problem getting into Path of Exile in general, and touching back on something that you said a few minutes ago, is like going into Path of Exile 2, I really want to see the campaign be shorter and it be a little harder, because it really sucked getting into the game when I was talking to like you and Moose about everything. You're like, well, you really just have to get past Axe and then you're playing the game, because you spend all that time and effort basically to get to a point where you can have fun with the game. I mean, you can have fun in the game, the campaign, obviously, but you know, you don't have a cohesive build. You don't have good gear. You don't even have the ability to like do much about it until later. And that crutch at the beginning, not even crutch, that like,
you really don't feel like you're playing your character until you have like 1 or 2 ascendancies.
Yeah, and that kind of sucks, to be honest. I really want to feel in Path of Exile 2 where I get to the point in the campaign where I'm enjoying playing the game, not just like pushing to get out of acts so I can enjoy the game. And I hope that in Path of Exile 2, with how they're going to structure things, that that's something I'm going to feel. And I think it'll also make it a lot easier for new players to go into that game if that is the case. Because, gosh, going through acts every single time a new league drops is just pulling teeth, man.
Yeah, I mean, I've been doing it for 6 years.
Long time, that's true. I've done it for 2 leagues, and it's already worn at my patience.
Yeah. Adam, you haven't said much. You're the newest POE player among us. What is something that you're interested in seeing, like, going forward?
So something that would be cool in regards to bosses that I know they're not going to be able to do because it'd be a pain in the ass, but, and this is going to sound really weird because it's coming from a game that no one really knows or plays anymore, which is RuneScape, but there's a boss fight in it where the mechanics of the boss changes depending on a path you take. And it had me thinking something that would be cool to see in a game like that is, because the big thing on it is like modifying maps, modifying this. So if they had like an end game boss that you could modify, and every time you modify it, it changes the mechanics of the boss fight, so it's never the same.
So Metamorph.
I mean, eventually you might like re-roll it, kind of like Metamorph, yeah. But instead of it being, build a bitch, it's build boss. And it, instead of it making it like, essentially the stats might not change on the boss, like health and all that kind of stuff, but the mechanics that it uses and how it attacks would be different, so that you're always getting some kind of different gameplay value from it to make it a little bit more replayable.
So, like, basically have a map version of Izaro, where Izaro has different mechanics, different weapons, different abilities depending on those weapons, different modifiers in the arena.
Yeah, because that would keep that boss fight fresh, right?
Yeah.
We have that. It is called Ultimatum.
It's funny. I just did Ultimatum for the first time today.
Oh, you did?
I did, yeah. Because
still
I had
haven't done
the
the new version
pieces
of it.
for the Ultimatum sitting around in my my guild stash, and I was like, "What is this?" So I finally looked it up and built it and did that fight. It is pretty cool, and it's less what Adam's talking about, but it is more on par with what Adam's talking about, which is like there are different things that the boss will do depending on the modifiers of the map that it's built on, which is really cool, and it keeps it fresh. And I like that idea of keeping it fresh because like it's cool to do you could take Uber Shaper since we were just talking about it. The Uber Shaper fight is the same every single time, except for the initial 4 rooms that you run into. You fight 4 different bosses before you fight Shaper. But that feels less fresh to me, and that feels more like this is a nuisance. I just want to be doing the Shaper fight. Why do I have to do this? But having something that actually makes it interesting, or maybe if they did it kind of like in reference to Adam talking about RuneScape, as I don't know if we have any RuneScape viewers, is they came out with Raids 3 on Old School RuneScape, which is the Tombs of Amasket. And what was cool about that is the Tombs of Amasket, basically, you can set the level of difficulty. So, basically, from level 0 to 50, you only have access to a certain amount of pool of drops. From 50 to 100, you unlock the next 2. And then, from 50 onwards, you unlock all drops. And then the higher you get, the better chance you have at a reward, but the harder it is. And to see something like that in Path of Exile would be really, really cool. Because also, now you're playing at your own pace, you have the ability to get certain drops, but also it's as difficult as you want it to be, and it keeps it fresh, and it keeps it entertaining, and there's risk for reward.
Something that you guys hear me complain about all the fucking time, the fucking crafting system makes me hate my fucking life, but something that would be kind of cool, which I know they probably can't do in a game like this. This is just one of those things that's an idea in my head. But I've played other games to where it sounds weird, but gear that improves quality of crafting. So basically, baseline crafting would be super fucking difficult. But have it to where, like, because there are people that enjoy crafting in games like this and go for currency items to craft, to where you can get your hands on pieces of equipment that are designed to help you craft better equipment for player base, So if you wanted to, you could do that as a way to generate income. You still have a chance to craft shit without crafting gear, but you have a higher chance if you like roll into stuff like that. Which
Kind of
I
take
know.
it how it is in labs, where like if you do an offering to the goddess, you get 3 options of what your enchant's going to be, but if you do a gift to the goddess, you get 6. Basically taking that concept and putting it on a piece of gear to make things easier.
Right, but still make it hard to obtain things like that because you don't want to like obviously just completely crash the way crafting works because it needs to be difficult because that's I understand that's how Path of Exile works with it, but just make it to where if you want to take the time to put all your like put effort into crafting, that you have a way to make it easier for you and reward you for doing that compared to just random Joe who sits there and just spams shit and hopes for the best.
There's plenty of ways that make crafting way more deterministic. Like
Right, but
you
my
can
thing
invest
is
a
you
lot into crafting and get like more deterministic results out of it.
it's I'm just speaking from the standpoint though of like as a beginner player who gets into the game and gets into crafting sucks dick because you don't realize that all that shit's out there. I was lucky
Yeah.
enough to have a group of people that have been playing this game long enough to explain it all to me. And yeah, you can sit there on Google for hours and try to figure out the best way to craft stuff. That works too, but I just feel like it'd be a lot easier to instead of having 6 different crafting spots to use shit to get more deterministic results, you can kind of condense it into just a specific type of way to do crafting, but have different levels of it to where you unlock shit by getting certain like gear or something that helps improve your crafting.
I feel like I'm missing something because I feel like you're just describing the way that crafting works in the game as it is already.
Well, you have like 16 different ways to do crafting in the game. I'm saying
Well, you
get
have
rid of the
a
16
bunch of-
different ways and make it so that the crafting system is one straightforward thing. That Horde crafting, it basically you'd be fucking lowering the amount of different resources that are useless in the game to begin with because I don't understand why you can't just craft certain things all on the same bench to begin with. Again, this is me being picky because I play different games and I'm not, whatever. It's just I feel like the way that they do crafting on that game is just all over the place. Yes, there are deterministic ways to do or more deterministic ways to do things, but I feel like it's just for newer players it's just confusing as shit because you have to do completely different ways of farming shit to get those specific deterministic results. And then if you want something else on that piece of equipment, then you have to go do something else to get the currency that you need to do that deterministic result. And it's just there's so much bouncing all over the place just to craft stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I get what you're saying. Like, it used to be a lot worse. There used to be, 6 or 7 different crafting benches back in the day for each of the Forsaken Masters. That all got condensed into one bench with the Betrayal expansion. And now most of the crafting stuff is tied to Syndicate. And then... But, I mean, there's really only, 4 places that you do crafting, and one of those is your stash. You're only, sometimes if you're doing really high-level crafting, then you're going to use the Bestiary. But other than that, you're pretty much just using your stash and occasionally the Horde crafting bench for Harvest. Harvest did used to be a hell of a lot stronger. Harvest used to be the best way to craft items, but when it was in that state, you were not guaranteed to have any of those crafts available to you at any given time. Basically, you would go into the garden, you'd kill plants, monster, and then you'd get a crafting bench at that crop. And then depending on the monsters you kill, it would be RNG of what crafts you have available. And then the Horde crafting station was something you could purchase from a shopee to store a single craft from that pool until later. And you needed to be in Harvest to be able to even access it. Granted, during Harvest... it was super plentiful. Also, during Harvest, you had to build these ridiculous, ADHD, OCD fucking gardens and like it was this whole like city planner mini game. And then like in maps you'd collect seeds and then you'd bring those seeds to the garden, plant them where in their specific spot, etc., etc. It's a lot more simplified now, but it was ridiculously too strong. There were people that have no idea how to play the game crafting maybe not mirror tier gear, but like some of the best items on the server, which is not a bad thing, but it also resulted in pretty big like drops in player retention because like yeah, cool, you can craft whatever you want. Now what? You know? And then it turned into like you didn't have to do the seeds, but you did. It would all be random, and you'd have to go on to like third party things like Forbidden Trove, and like ask people like, "Hey, do you have this craft at your garden? Cool. Can I come? Can I give you my item? Can I trust you with my crafting base that's worth 20 divines or 20 exalts, and have you craft this thing onto it and not troll me or steal my item?" So they've toned down the power a lot, but they've made it a hell of a lot more accessible.
It's funny hearing, because, like, Adam being a beginning player, I'm not a veteran by any means, but I do know that when GGG tries to make crafting easier, there's a big backlash kind of from the more experienced community who are like, no, we don't want it to be easier. And more beginner players are like, we do want it to be easier. And it's hard for them to meet in the middle, because the thing with the veterans is they already know how the system works. So they want to see new things added to the system that doesn't necessarily make it easier, that just makes it cool. Whereas like beginner players want to see like how the hell does this work? They haven't hit the knowledge floor yet. So they're just kind of like me personally, when I went through my playthrough of Path of Exile for the first time, I was using white items in like Act 8 because I didn't realize that an Orb of Alchemy made all the difference in the world when you're using a piece of gear.
So I want to add in that you're wrong, actually. No, veteran players want better, more deterministic crafting. Some of the most veteran players, especially content creators, were singing the praises, and everybody still complains that Harvest is in such a nerfed state. People want more deterministic crafting. Everybody does. So everybody gets frustrated with it, but there is the like give and take with it of like, yes, people love it, but also it does hurt the game long term. And that's to
put in perspective, right? To put in perspective of what I meant by like the whole crafting gear thing and all that stuff. What I meant for that to be is so you know how when you roll an item, let's say it's eye level 85, right? So you can get some like the best like tiers out of that. You still have a fairly high RNG of rolling lower tiers, which is part of the whole RNG experience. The idea is that it makes it almost like lower or like raising where your bottom line would be. So like, because there's how many tiers is it to stats? Is like 7 tiers or something like that?
It depends on the stat. Some I think go to like 13 or something, but you have really low odds of hitting those low ones.
Right. But I mean, like, it just in a way to where it almost makes it so that you have better odds of hitting some of the higher ones, but it's still going to be RNG. It's just, it'd be stuff that helps you with crafting, so it's guaranteed, like, you know,
we
stats,
have fossils.
But right.
What is it? Intrinsic fossil? One of the fossils makes it. I'm literally going to open POE right now to check the name of it. There is a fossil that makes it so that you have a higher chance of rolling higher tier modifiers. And fossil crafting is already ridiculously powerful when used correctly. Granted, it's not ideal for every single craft in the game, but it's definitely useful for most crafts in the game. At least somewhere in the crafting process. So like that does exist. Uh, Sanctified fossil.
Divide fossils.
It says numeric sanctified fossil numeric modifier values are lucky, and high level modifiers are more common.
I suppose that's fair. Also, crafting. I mean, the crafting system in the game. I like the crafting system in the game where it is. Having only played for 2 leagues, I've enjoyed where the crafting system is. Given it was very frustrating when I had no idea what I was doing when I first started, but like I had you guys to help me along through it.
Yeah, and like I've been playing the game, like I said, for 6 years, 7 years, something like that. And I still get frustrated with the crafting system. I still run into like I have no idea how this mechanic works. I have no idea how to do this, that, or the other thing. But there's usually a solution to most problems that you're gonna run into with it. Like it's not a perfect system by any means, but I would be happy having a slightly more deterministic crafting system. That's just like a little more straightforward and easier to understand. I think a lot of the problem that PoE has is that it's really bad at communicating to new players what anything is or does. And that's not like that's not a hot take. Like that's a pretty well established and pretty broadly agreed on take in the community. It's and they don't seem to be doing a ton about that. And I wish they would. Like I don't think that there's any tutorialization for how fossil crafting works in any way and like why you should use it.
That's true. I mean, kind of if you do. No, never mind. I was say kind of if you do delve, but I mean, even when you do delve,
it
you don't
doesn't
get taught
explain-
crafting. You just get
Yeah.
taught how to delve.
You're just like, what the fuck is this weird rock?
And you don't even really get taught how to delve. You just kind of figure it out by common sense. Follow the cart with the pretty lights on it.
Yeah. That's the one thing I know that the community likes about Path of Exile naturally is that there's people who's been playing this game for a decade and are still learning new things about it today.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that's a draw to the game because that's part of what keeps a game fresh. Is if there's always something new to learn, then you're always interested.
There's always a new way to approach. Even if there isn't something new for you to learn, there's always a new way to approach a build. There's probably like a minimum of like 5 with a cap of endless possibilities for a way to build a character around any given skill. It is just so much versatility in the game, and I think that's what exemplifies it. But with that versatility and depth and complexity comes really steep skill floors.
Yeah.
But I do think a lot of the gap comes from too, like there's a very steep knowledge floor, but the skill floor doesn't always feel like it matches up. But then there'll be a sudden spike in ridiculous skill floor difficulty. And like gear checks are important in this type of game, but gear checks do feel bad a lot of the time, you know? So,
Yeah.
like you were saying earlier with boss fights, like it feels like a currency check.
Yeah,
Like,
and
this
currency checks kind of suck. Because
This
like
is your
RuneScape,
IRS showing up for a welfare check.
RuneScape is a game I grew up with as well. So like putting it into terms of like how RuneScape works is only have so many items in the game. You have, how many tiers are there? There's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 tiers roughly. You can kind of consider 8.5, 9, but basically, RuneScape kind of lacks what PoE has in the crafting system and being able to get cool and unique and different items. Because in RuneScape, it's all one item you're chasing, right? There's a Bando's chestplate is the best in slot most of the time if you are a melee build. If you are a ranged build, you get an Armadillo chestplate. I know things have been added to both RuneScape 3 and old school RuneScape since those two items, but I'm just using them as an example. In Path of Exile,
it's all locked behind bosses and everything because it
Yeah.
forces players to go fight bosses. Unlike Path of Exile, where you can craft those things outside of bosses, you don't need to worry about doing bosses
right.
because you don't have to touch a single boss your entire time playing that game.
Better yet, you can go fight a boss for the first time ever with an item that you can only get from that boss.
Which, I mean, you can...
I mean, technically, you can do that in most games if it's a sellable
Yeah.
item, but
Yeah.
It's still
Well,
amazing.
the idea that I was going with there is just like it's flat, and there's only so many items you can get leading up to a certain point. And honestly, if you have like the gaps between the items at tier 40 to tier 60 to tier 60 to 80 are huge. But also, you can do a good majority of the content if you know what you're doing on a lower level account. Like my thought process goes to the fight caves and in old school RuneScape, because in old school RuneScape it's been proven that you can basically, on a fresh account, if you know what you're doing and you know how to play the game, you can go in and fight a boss at level 3 and beat the fight caves at level 3. Maybe not level 3, but I know at the very least level 20. And like with Path of Exile, it feels less like, because there's only static items in the game, where you have to craft and buy everything that you're going to use, and if it doesn't line up with exactly how your character is built, or there's a gap somewhere, then you get checked and then boom, you die. And then you're like, okay, well, now instead of crafting something or getting another tier of items, or you don't know where your next step is besides I need to upgrade my gear, and then it becomes currency simulator.
Yeah. I think that one of the biggest things that helped me like gain a new appreciation for a lot of the things in PoE and a lot of the things that used to frustrate me a lot with PoE was playing solo self-found for a league. I think that really changed my perspective on the game a lot. Because you don't have access to trading. You can't sit there and be like, okay, well, I'm going to do this thing for this amount of time, and then I'm going to sell everything off for a bunch of divines. It's if you're doing a thing, that is your income. You get a new appreciation for every unique that drops. You get a new appreciation for all of the currency that drops, because now you're like, okay, well, this is not currency, this is crafting material. The only thing I'm going to spend this on that isn't crafting is Kirak, probably. Or
that's
the bench.
literally the only way I've been playing PoE for like a hot minute, because I don't really use the trade system apart from when I just buy my initial gear.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem is I've apparently RNG hates me so much in that game that like I was saying before to Zach, this entire league, I have gotten 2 exalt drops. I've never had exalts in my fucking storage because I don't get them. Same thing with like raw divines. I've maybe gotten 3 raw divine drops.
But so the question becomes, how many maps are you doing in a single, like, give me an average time length of you blasting maps, and then how many maps you do in that amount of time.
At this point, I don't even know because I took a break from playing, but I've never looked at it from the standpoint of how many maps am I doing, because I don't like spreadsheeting. I know you have to in that game. You get forced to at certain points, but I still don't like it.
You don't get forced to. Like, you never have to play outside of your comfort zone. But what I'm trying to say is, like, time invested, the difficulty of the content that you're doing, and how quickly you're able to clear through. Like, if you and I are both playing for mapping for like an hour every day, but I can do 10 maps in that hour, 15 maps in that hour, and you're doing like 8 maps. It's not a huge difference, but it definitely adds up. And being able to like there's two mentalities. There's hideout warrior mentality and there's hideout is lava mentality. If you play with the hideout is lava mentality, you are doing everything you can to just like go through all of your maps, go through like roll a bunch of maps, do them, throw everything in a dump tab, price it later. If you want to be super efficient, you price the dump tab and then just bring it down over time until things just don't sell because nobody gives a shit about them. And then you vendor all that shit and get rid of it, and then you go again. There's also like raw drops aren't where most of your currency is going to come from. Most of your currency is going to come from trading. It's going to come from like the little things, or the bigger things. I'm at the point this league where I'm really not trying to do trades that are under 30C. Just because I don't care that much about it. But it's the more you're able to run, and if you're juicing your maps even a little bit, putting scarabs on them, sextants, like you can't not profit off of it. Is basically where I'm at.
I don't know. Maybe it's just because my background of gaming isn't ARPGs. For me, I hate the fact that it just depends on the trade system. I like playing games and collecting shit myself and doing everything without having to use trade systems most of the time. And trying to do that with this game is just, it's not, again, this is my experience. Compared to other games I played, it doesn't meet that expectation, I guess. Not that there's anything wrong with that. It's just that I think that's why I've just kind of, I don't know, like it doesn't hit the same for me.
I get you. I mean, I've done Shaper on solo self-found. So like, I can tell you don't need trade to play the game. I've played leagues in the past where I've barely touched trade. Like I've sold things, but I've not gone on to buy things. Like I would play a league or two where I just used whatever I traded as crafting material, and I had a lot of fun with that. I think that like I think what would be a fun thing to do, especially since our group, we have like a lot of people playing now. I don't know that everybody would be into it, but I think maybe next league or a league this year, why don't we all just buy into a private league and do group self-found?
I'd actually think that was pretty cool. Something I was going to say to you, Adam, is looking at Path of Exile from an Iron Man standpoint of RuneScape, is like, you're not getting a lot of Exalt drops, but there are ways to get Exalts through what's already in the game. Not so much Divines-ish, since it's the highest currency, but I mean, kind of Sanctum kind of takes over that spot, I think, as far as Divines goes. But like Exalts, you can do Harbingers. Harbingers are going to drop Exalt shards, maybe not at a high rate, but if you do, 50 maps worth of Harbingers, you're probably going to have at least 5 or 6 Exalts. At least. And that's if you're not juicing them.
I was going to say, I'm spec'd into Harbinger, and I still don't really...
That's a lot to expect for Exalts from Harbinger. As a guy that was my main farming strategy for 2 leagues with bumps to valuable currency shards, like even this league, I spent my first probably like 400, 500 maps with fully spec'd into Harbinger, with everything but sextants, and I still really wasn't getting that many. I probably have gotten in 500, 400 maps, something like that. I've probably gotten like 4 Exalts.
That's interesting, because I have a very different experience with Harbingers, because I've ended up with, like, in the 200 maps that I ran when I was juicing for Apothecary, I got over 20 exalts and had no idea what to do with them all. I'm still sitting on 9 of them.
And that's the lovely bit about how the RNG works in the game, because for some people it works, for some other people it doesn't.
But I
Sometimes you
mean, I
just get
will
screwed.
say there's at least a way to get exalts that's consistent, even if it's not the fastest process, I guess.
But it's also about
See,
like bumping your RNG. Like if you're so like when Zach was farming apothecaries, he was doing 4 sextants with with like high item quantity on the maps,
Yeah.
full scarab investment,
Yep.
full investment on the tree into things that are gonna give him more results.
But how consistent can you do that without using trade?
That depends.
Yeah, that does depend. Because so I
But
am
it
running.
is a trade league strategy. Is the thing to note
Right.
there.
That is
Like-
true, but I mean, you could also do it on solo self-found too, though. I mean, as far as sextants goes, I am running the best sextants for that strategy, right? In Lage strong boxes, I am running harbingers for side profit. I am running extra strong boxes for the quant, and then something like a gloom shrine. I'm running the best possible sextants. That being said, what are they called? Awakened Sextants? Awakened Sextants are pretty easy to come by. I usually get 1 or 2 per map, at least. And if you get a good shrine for Eater or
It's Exarch for
Exarch.
sextants.
Exarch, then
I get
I've
like
ended up
1 or
with like
2 per,
15
like, 3
sextants
maps.
per map for a good Exarch modifier. But if I were to just run sextants that weren't for that, I could still run sextants to make the maps better and still end up helping my overall quantity and all that fun stuff.
Yeah, one thing that I do a lot early on in a league where I'm not investing in buying sextants from other players is I just look for like I will roll my sextants myself and I will target basically anything that adds more monsters into the map, whether it's the like X additional pack of X element monster, or 25% increased magic pack size. The ones that I really like making sure I get on if I'm self-rolling because they're really common are the ones that add packs of rare monsters because rare monsters have the higher item quantity and item rarity built into them. And it also raises your chances of getting those delicious loot goblins that are going to give you like a whole stack of polished and gilded, and maybe if you're really lucky, a winged scarab. I think I've gotten like 2 winged scarabs off of those guys this league. Basically so the current way of looking at things is if you need currency now and not specifically any kind of currency, but you need like good mid-tier currency and mapping currency now, run Exarch. Full invest into Exarch influence. Spam it over and over again on every map. Juice the map as much as you can, and go for all of the minion ones. Because the minion ones are going to give you, like, your chances to drop the chisels, sextants, chaos orbs. Whereas if you don't need currency immediately, but you want those higher payouts, then you go for Eater. His Eater influence is going to have the exalts, the divines, etc. But it also is flooded with, like, alteration orbs. So,
Which isn't a bad thing. Good base crafting material.
I mean, I gave you, like, 1,200 alteration orbs, and I was still sitting on, like, 3,600.
Yep.
So
what I've learned from this episode is that I'm gonna play solo self-found next league.
I think you would have a good time with solo self-found.
It sounds like fun.
And I think especially, like, your 3rd league in, like, I think it's going to force you to approach the game in a way that you haven't had to, and I think that it's going to... Like, I think you already have, like, a good appreciation for the game, but I think that you're going to gain a lot out of it.
I think that's fair. I do look forward to that.
Yeah, I'm either down to do, like, a group solo self-found kind of thing, if you guys wanted to do like a private league.
I'd be down. That sounds like fun.
Or I'm going stupid hard on trade. Like, because I've been having a really good league, and I feel like I've like something has clicked in my brain that hasn't in the past like 20 leagues. And I feel like I've got like a grasp on the game that I haven't had before. And I think that if I were to play trade next league, then I'm going super hardcore, and I'm going to like set a goal of trying to make 30 divines within my first or second week.
That'd be cool to watch.
I think it would be stupid easy. I already have a plan in mind. The first like 2 days of the league, you can buy 8 passive large cluster jewels for shit, because nobody needs them the first couple days of the first like 2 or 3 days of the league. So 8 passive cluster jewels are pretty cheap. You buy a bunch of those in bulk, craft up even if you don't craft anything good on them, but you can easily craft something good on them. You resell them a week later for like triple, quintuple your investment. Easily.
That's fair. The only thing that's stopping you there is item level of the cluster jewel.
Yeah, but people are running heist, and
True.
early on cluster jewels, doesn't matter what the item level is. You just want a 8 passive cluster jewel with
3 passives,
2 or 3 passives.
Notables. Yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair.
So
Sounds like a pretty sound thing. I'd go with solo self-found too. I'd be interested to see you do Trade Simulator.
yeah, I'm undecided, but I'm into the group self-found idea. It kind of also maybe incentivizes us to do some like party play shenanigans, but we'll see.
Yeah, I figured out how fishing works out on Path of Exile, so I think I'm going to do that next league. But that's all the time we have for this episode.
All right, gamers, thank you for listening.
Bye.